Advanced particle tutorial. Yippee! I have a bunch of things set up. Can I talk about particles today? So if you don't know what particles are, you don't know how to use them, you're not really good at making sabers, this isn't for you. So you don't like sabers, or you're kind of just getting into it and you're not really sure, what you're really doing, maybe it might be a good idea to save this tutorial for later on. But for those of you who are interested in learning more about particles, hi, I'm here to teach you about those. So, to get started, we're going to just go to Effects, Particle System, Makeup Particle System. So, probably know what a particle system is. This is what it looks like. Pretty generic, pretty basic. Gonna go over the basics real quick. Just gonna scale it down a little bit. So, what a particle system is, you can move it, resize it, rotate it, do whatever with it. Right here in this first area, these are your main settings. You can change the duration, how long the system lasts, if it's looping or if it's not looping, if it has a pre-warm on it, which we'll get into that, delay, lifetime speed, all these different things. So the first thing I'm going to go over, I'm going to go down in a line, so this might be a pretty long video. Duration, if you have it set to looping, it doesn't really matter. But if you turn looping off, and I reset the duration to 1, click restart, you'll see it go, but after a second it stops. If I set it to like 5, click restart, see it goes for a bit, goes for about 5 seconds, and then it stops. So this is useful for animations, so you can animate it, the particle system turns on, and system turns on, it goes for a set amount of time, and then eventually turns itself off without you having to do anything, which can be really useful in like startup animations and everything. Looping on, you'll have this setting called pre-warm. What this is if you look, I restart the product system, it kind of starts up, right? Like that. But if you don't want it to do that and you want it to just immediately be there, you can turn looping on and turn on pre-warm. And what that does is rather than having it start up, you can just have it immediately be in kind of, a finished state. So like there's a max of 50 particles, or I guess there's a high of 50 particles at once. You notice that the system kind of goes up to that 50 particles gradually. With pre-warm, immediately hits that limit. That's where it stays. Lifetime is pretty, kind of self-explanatory. Increase the lifetime, the particles live for longer. So if we go down to like 1, they don't live for long. Same thing with start speed. Let's just change start to 5. Start speed just makes them move faster. So, yeah. There's a couple drop downs right here. I have things like constant, curve, random between 2 constants, and random between 2 curves. I won't get into those just yet. I'll get into those later on. But for now, all you need to know about is just the basics. 3D start size. Probably should go over start size first. Start size, also self-explanatory. Increase the start size, they start bigger. Decrease the start size, they start smaller. Basic stuff. 3D start size, however, allows you to change the size based on different axes. So say, for example, I wanted to make the Y bigger than the X and the Z, I could do that. Or maybe I want to make the X bigger, I could do that. The Z bigger, which you can't see unless I were to go over here, I think. No, okay. But I guess when dealing with flat particles, the only thing you should worry about is X and Y. Once you get into things like 3D particles, then you'll have to get into the Z, which I will explain later. 3D start rotation, same thing as the start size. You have start rotation. They'll start with like they'll start rotated. Right? There you go. Yeah, you can't tell because of the circles, but if you look at the hitboxes, they are rotated. You can do this, 3D start rotation. I think, yeah, okay, for start rotation, for some odd reason, it's like the complete opposite of the 3D start size. Start size, only worry about X and Y. Rotation worries about Z and I think Y. Yeah, I think it's just Z unless you deal with like more complicated stuff, which I will get into, just not yet. Flip rotation, I can't remember what this does. Not sure if you really need flip rotation. I've never used it personally, but you know, if there's a use for it, probably look it up. Start color. This is self-explanatory. You can change the color that it starts as. And before I move on, I want to get a bit more in depth with start color. Some materials don't actually allow this, like say the base right here. If I were to change this to a Beat Saber, this is a Beat Saber shader. The wall core shader should be, there you go. If I get rid of that, change this to white, as you can see, the start color does not modify all shaders. Some shaders do, some shaders don't. You won't always need to use start color. But if you have a shader that does support the color changing, which I do know there are a few, I just can't really name them, you can change start color to whatever you want. There's also the slider down here. This is the alpha channel. You can increase or decrease the transparency. Pretty neat. As well with start color, you can also click this drop down. You got a couple more options than you would with like lifetime and speed. There's gradient, which you can click on that. Brings up this little window. You can click on these nodes at the top, change alpha values, and these nodes at the bottom to change color values. If I do that, you'll see it kind of fades into each other. And what that does is it, over that 5-second period of duration, it will go through that gradient until it loops again, which is pretty neat. It's this blend option, there's a fixed option as well. So you can kind of have it fixed rather than blend. And the alpha option, some of them will, so like they'll be transparent and then they'll become less transparent over time. You get what I mean. There's a random between two colors, meaning it will choose either, see if I change this to blue. It'll choose between red and blue, kind of like gradient. It's a bit weird, but eh. There's also a random between two gradients. You can choose two gradients. It'll choose a random. I think it chooses a random gradient. Random color. This is my favorite one to use. Random color will pick a random color from the gradient. So if I were to right click right here, which that's how you add more nodes, you right click. You can change the color to whatever you want. Change this one to like green. And you'll notice that it randomizes. It chooses a random color out of every single color in this spectrum. You can change it to fixed. Do this. Click there. Move this over. And you'll notice that now it chooses one of the three solid colors. So it's pretty neat. Very cool feature. If you have shaders that support it, definitely recommend using this. Okay, next thing. Gravity modifier. Gravity modifier is very finicky. For the most part, you'd want to use it in world space particles, but what gravity modifier does is it essentially gives particles gravity. So the particles are affected by gravity. They start with their start speed, but over time can dampen to fit the gravity. Usually, you'd want to have it at pretty low values, especially for saber making, because sabers are very small. Beat Saber, you're very small. You don't really notice that, but the sabers are like not very big. when using the gravity modifier, definitely make them very small values. A good tip for using gravity modifier is you can actually turn it into negative values and make them kind of fall upwards, which is really neat and can be used in some really cool things. Next, simulation space. Right now, the particles are simulating in local space. So if I move them around, they move like this. If I were to make a 3D object or a cube, and let's just say this all to 0, 0, just for other access. Let's just say this cube was emitting particles for whatever reason. And you would put the particle system on the cube. Particles would always stay on the cube. Can't really show it because they don't want to play, and I don't want to press play because my camera's in front of it, so I can't see where the play button is. But you get the idea. Particles will always stay attached to the cube. Versus world space. World space kind of bugs out there. If you look, it looks the same until you move it. You'll notice that the particles don't follow where the parent object is, but rather kind of stay in the world. Just give you another look at that. This is local space. This is world space. Gives you a good idea. And combined with gravity modifier, you can do some really cool stuff. This is how we usually do like drips of water or something, for example. In terms of custom, don't really know what it does. If I'm entirely honest, I don't think you need it much. But it's there if you know how to use it, so there's that. Simulation speed, pretty obvious, just makes, simulate faster, which could be good, really good, if you are making something with like a bunch of different things and maybe it's going too slow for your liking, and you know that, if I want to speed it up, I'd have to make it go faster, but I have to change all these values, but you don't have to do that. You can just increase the start speed or the simulation speed, and it'll just change for you, which is really helpful sometimes. Delta time, don't know what this does. From my experience, it does literally nothing. Scaling mode, this is actually very important. When making sabers, if you're using particles, a very, very, very good rule of thumb is to always set your particle systems to hierarchy. Reason being is that if you set it to local, these particles will kind of screw up their size. I'll give an example, but I can't really think of a good way to pull it off because it's kind of hard to pull off, but you'll know it when it happens. So say you make a saber and you put particles on it, and those particles decide to, be much, much, much bigger in game than they were in Unity, because they're scaling to what they were here. And to change that, to fix that, you would change the scaling mode to hierarchy, and they would look correct in game. Sometimes you'll see the bug in Unity, sometimes you won't, but just remember, always change your particles to hierarchy. Play on awake, pretty obvious. If I turn this off, if I turn off play on awake, and I turn the particle system back on, you'll notice that it doesn't play until I manually play it. Versus if I turn play on awake on, and the particle system is off, and I turn it back on. Okay, that's not a good demonstration because I'm not in play mode, but if I were in play mode, it would automatically be on. That's also good for animations. Emitter velocity, rigid body, transform, don't know the differences, if I'm honest. But, it's there if you need it. Max particles, usually, ideally, you'd want to keep this at 1000, but you'd be surprised the game can handle a decent amount of particles. It's not to say to go all crazy, all out, but the game can handle a good amount of particles. So, if you want to maybe limit the amount of particles on screen at one time, so 10, you'll notice that the max particles drops down and will always stay at 10. So until those ones die off, it will not spawn more. So it'll always try and stay at that max. If you just keep it at 1000, it'll not go up to 1000, it'll just go up to how much it can based on the lifetime and the speed. Stop action. Never use these, don't know what it does. Calling mode. Never use this either. And ring buffer mode, never use this either. So these things you don't really have to worry about for Saber creation. It's not that big of a deal. So now that I'm actually through this beginning part, I'd like to get into quickly get into these drop-down menus because these are going to be very important for getting into very advanced product systems. Start lifetime right here, and I guess a lot of other variables like start speed, start size, and start rotation all have these different drop downs. You can choose a curve. If I were to go right here and add a key by right clicking, you can make it curve so that way throughout its lifetime of 5 seconds, the speed will change. So it will like be a high velocity and then it'll dip down to a low velocity and then it'll go back up to a high velocity. A good tip for curves is you can click on a curve and then hold Control, click on another point and another one if you want, and then kind of around where the point is, not exactly on it, but kind of like next to it, you can right click. It's a bit finicky. Oh, I can't see my mic's in the way. You can right click, if you get it, come down to here to both tangents and click on linear. They'll straighten out, they'll be more linear. This is usually what you want to do for particles, or at least that's what I find myself doing a lot of the time. But always go back, make it curved, and it'll stay kind of curvy like that. So pretty useful. Same thing can be applied to pretty much everything else that has drop downs. Random between two constants, pretty simple. Chooses a random start speed. So try to go say like 20, or I guess lifetime, and then 1. You'll notice that the lifetime will vary. So some of them you'll notice them despawning in the middle, some of them take much longer, it just chooses a random value. So this does not apply to the duration, it is just random. Also the same thing with curves, make 2 curves, and it'll randomize between them. Now, these values are very, very, very important because things like 3D start size, you can choose a drop down for this as well. And you can do random between two constants, and now you have even more customization. So let's say I wanted the 3D start size for this to be between 1 and 5. And then maybe the Y value between 0.5 and 3. Now you have all these different shapes of particles going all over the place. It's a very, very, very useful value. You're definitely going to want to be utilizing it a lot more as you get more in depth with Saber creation. So now onto the emission. Emission, you're always going to have this on. If you turn it off, particle system's not going to do anything. The emission is literally the emit. Right here, rate over time, you can turn this up. Say like 100, now it's emitting more particles. And you see the max amount is now jumped up to 500. Because there's a lot more particles. If you were to go like 10,000, I think it's 100,000, you'll notice it'll cap at 1,000 and not, I think this is 100,000. I'm trying to do math. 1, 2, 3, that's 100,000. Okay. You'll notice that it caps at 1,000. This is because you set the max particles. The max particles is 1,000. So when it reaches the max particle limit, it's trying to emit 10,000 as fast as it can, so it does just that. That's why you get that weird burst. So if you wanted it to have that many, you'd have to set it to some absurd number, and then Unity's going to start to lag a lot. So definitely do not want to do that. That's guess what it was supposed to look like, because it's emitting all 10,000 dollars. You usually don't want to go that high, but it's there for unit. You can also decrease the emission, so it emits much slower. Same thing with the curves. You can do random between two constants, so it randomizes how fast it emits. Like sometimes it'll emit slow, sometimes it'll emit fast. So yeah, I can't really see it very well, but it's there. Rate over distance? I think it's the farther. I don't know. I really couldn't tell you. I've never actually used rate over distance, so yeah, I don't know. Really don't know what this is. If anyone knows what this is, please let me know, because I definitely don't. Bursts, these can be useful. To make a burst, click right here on this pause button, and if I turn the emission off, notice there's a little burst right there. Every time the system loops, so every 5 seconds, it'll burst. So if I change this to like 0.5, you'll see it bursting a lot. We can change the amount of particles that it emits. So if I were to choose like 2, it would just shoot out 2 every single loop. Versus if I were to choose 50, shoot out 50 every single burst. Here's the time. This is just like a delay. So like if I restart, it delays the burst by 1 second. So I can delay it by like half a second. Oh wait, no, I don't think this is delay. No, it is delay. Okay, I was just spamming the button. Okay, I confused myself for a second there. No, it's a delay. Delays the burst. Cycles, this is how many times it bursts throughout that 5 second period. I think. Maybe. I have no clue. Some things I just really don't know about particle systems. I do know a lot of things, but some things just aren't strong suit. Interval. Messed around with this value before. I don't know what it does. Probability. This is a very, very good value. If I change it to 0.5, there is now a 50% chance that it'll emit. So if I turn off looping, you'll notice that I click restart. Did I add? Yeah, there it is. So there's a burst. I clicked at that time, didn't burst. Click at that time, didn't burst. Didn't burst. So there's a 50-50% chance. It's based off of percentage. I mean, it's a decimal, but it's based off percentage. Put it to 1, so a 100% chance it'll burst every single time. Change it to 75. I mean, 0.75. There's a 75% chance you get a burst. It's a pretty high chance, but it's there. Alright. Next one, change the mission. Shape. Shape is pretty complicated. Stop it. Oh, I have the burst on. You can remove bursts by pressing this minus button, by the way. Shape, right here. This is the shape of the emitter. This right here is the emitter. This is how particles are going to move when they are emitted. So a cone does this. It emits in a cone shape. Choose a hemisphere. It'll emit from this hemisphere shape. We can choose a sphere, emit in all directions. Donut, box. My favorite to use is the box because it's very, very customizable. And a bunch of other ones. One of them I'm going to focus on mainly is going to be the mesh, but I'll get to that very soon. For cone, or I guess for all shapes, they have a lot of different settings. I think each one has varying settings. I'm not going to go over all of them. I guess a lot of it's going to be based on your own experimentation. But before I get into that, I'm going to pause the video real quick and make sure I have enough storage to keep recording. Good news, I have storage. I have storage. I can record. This is awesome. Anyways, cone. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, the shapes. You can change a lot of values about them. It's like this cone. You can change the angle, and you'll see it has a wider spread. Radius. You change the radius of it. Radius thickness right here. This is something that you'd have to look closely at. Basically, if I do that, if I change it to 0, particles will only emit from the edge. And you can change that radius thickness, and they will emit, only within this radius. So you will not have any particles emitting in this middle. Which is pretty neat. Arc. Turn this down. Way down. And I don't think there's any visualization for it. But you notice that the particles are only emitting from here. This is because starting from right here, going around in a circle, it emits in an arc. So if I increase this arc, I guess if I change it to 180, it'll now kind of emit in this half right here. And if I change it to 360, it'll emit from the whole thing. Modes, you can do a couple different modes. Random is just emitting at random. Loop will emit in a loop, so if you look closely, you can actually see how they kind of spin in a circle and loop around. You can actually change the speed of a loop, so it goes faster or slower. And you can change the spread. I don't really mess with the spread much because it can get a bit finicky to the point where you're getting stuff like this. It's just weird. There's ping pong, which goes back and forth. So if I turn the speed down, see it goes like this, and it comes back around, and it goes right there. So it kind of ping pongs around in this circle. And then there's burst spread, which I don't know what this does. Next, emit from. Let's turn the spread back down. You can choose to emit from the base, which this is the base, or you can choose to emit from the volume. The volume is literally anywhere in this emitter. It will emit from anywhere. The base is just that bottom part. So volume, whole thing, base, just the base. Texture, I don't know what adding a texture does, if I'm honest. But it probably does something cool. I don't know, I've never really seen it do much. Okay, this is pretty good for a lot of customization things, which I will get into later when I get into things like radials, velocity over lifetime, force of lifetime, and stuff like that. But main thing to know is you can change the position of the emitter itself. So while it has its own X, Y, and Z positions and rotations and everything, scale, right? Change all this, but you can also change the position, rotation, and scale of the emitter itself. No, FX. You cannot do some drop downs or anything for this, but if I do this, you'll notice that the emitter rotates, even though the system itself is still at 90 degrees. Again, this is most useful for things later on, but for now, you can mainly focus on the scale. So the reason why I said earlier that the box is my favorite to use is because you can change the scale. What I like to do is I can change the scale down to 0, 0, 0, and now I just have a straight line of particles. Just a perfectly flat line. I use this a lot in things that I make. It works with like the cone, and I think it just works with everything. But the box is just more convenient because it just makes sense. That's that. Align to direction. This is actually really cool. If you look, it will align to a direction. I think I actually have. No, I don't. Okay. This is aligning to a direction. Basically, this will make the particle align to the direction that it was emitted from. Now, you can randomize the direction right here. And this, if you look, I'll change it back. You notice when these are emitting, they will emit in the shape of a cone. So they will always kind of go outwards, right? If you change the randomized position, you notice that they don't always go outwards, but they go in random directions. They still take that cone shape, but now going, different directions rather than just like, I'll turn pre-one back on, rather than just this cone shape, they go in their own directions. Oh no, that's position. This is direction. This makes more sense. There it is. Randomized position is different. I think this just makes it so that it does emit from the base, but it can emit a bit further out. So say like beneath it, above it. Not too useful for basic particle systems, but good for more advanced stuff. Serialized direction makes these go spherical. It'll be based off of the base, but if you go into like a box, it'll spherize the direction that it goes in. Pretty neat. You can turn this value up and down, and it acts like a radius again, if you remember when I was talking about radius earlier. Yeah, you think of this as like a 180 degrees, and then this as like a 360 degrees, if that makes sense. So that's basically how shape works. Next, I will go over velocity over lifetime. So for this, I'm actually going to turn the start lifetime, or the start speed off. And I'm going to change the emission to a box. So the way velocity over lifetime works is it allows you to change the speed of the particle over its life. So if I were to change to the y to 1, it, kind of acts like a normal speed, right? This is actually very, very, very useful. Not only can you directly customize which direction the particle speed is in, but combined with a couple other modifiers, you can make some pretty cool stuff. I think the best example I can give is fire particles. I know I made a fire particle system using world space, and then I set the velocity over lifetime. If you set the velocity over lifetime to world space right here, what it'll do is it will, oh, whoops, I'm screwing these up. It will not, you have the velocity set to world space, doesn't do much, the simulation space to world. So if the simulation space is on local, right, this just looks like a start speed of 1. But since the velocity over lifetime is set to world, if I were to rotate it, they continue going upwards. So if I were to turn this back to local, and then turn this to world space, see, these are world space now. If I rotate it, they will always be going in the direction of where the emitter is shooting out of. So it's shooting out of this phase right now. They will always be shooting in that direction. And if I take this off real quick, one major difference, start speed, right there. It will always follow this constant start speed. Versus if I have velocity over lifetime, and it is set to local, you'll notice that the velocity will change based on the direction of the emitter, which is really neat. Let's just fix the rotation on that. if I set this to 1, I set this to world. I think this is world space, yeah. Okay, did I show this off? I think I did. Did I? I don't know. But essentially, if I rotate this, even though they should be shooting out this direction, they're still going up. So no matter how it's rotated, they will always lock to the world space Y value. Or X, or whatever. Okay. Orbitals. These are pretty cool. Just making sure I have all my values correct. My apologies. Orbitals. Set this to 1. Let's set this to a circle for now. And let's make the radius thickness like that. So now the particles are always emitting from the radius. Basically, these particles are emitting from this radius right here. If I change the orbital on the y to like this, you'll notice that they will always spin in this direction, this y direction. If I change it to z, the particles are spinning. This is usually how we make particle rings, because it's orbiting around in that direction. You can do the same with box. Just doesn't look as correct, but you can still tell what's going on now that I've told you what it does. And you combine all these, make some crazy looking stuff. Also, I forget what this does. Don't ask me. I forget what it does. I am sorry. Speed modifier. This is basically the same as the speed modifier up here, except it will only affect the velocity over lifetime modifier. So it's a speed modifier, but it only affects this, nothing else. Radials, these are very fun. If I just go to, let's set speed 5, and then I set the emission to spherized direction, and let's turn the emission up a bit. Just get this chaoticness. If I were to change the radial to -1, or maybe negative, like, yeah, 10, you can see they're all trying to go back into that center. So on like lower levels, I think it's kind of finicky. You notice that they're kind of slowing down as I increase the value. Eventually, once I get to the speed value that it has, kind of just stops. 4. But best way I can do it is constant. Between two constants, I do like 5, 5, 5, 5, -5, and -5. It's the same thing as a spherized direction. And then I change the radial to 5. You notice that some of them kind of collapse inwards. This. It's kind of difficult to get it perfect. But it's there if needed. So it'll always, if you have a negative radial, it will kind of collapse inward on itself. You can actually use the radial with animators. So if you're using an animator, you can have a 0 radial, and then at a certain point in the animation, set it to the start speed, and then they'll all kind of collapse in on itself. If I were to fix this because I'm stupid. They all kind of collapse inwards. It's very neat, very cool. Positive radial will do this. So if I collapse it again, they'll kind of collapse inwards, and then I do a positive radial, they shoot out. Collapse in, shoot out. Collapse in, shoot out. It's the best demonstration of a radial that I can give. It's like a black hole and then a black hole exploding. Pretty neat. Limit velocity over lifetime. What this will do is it's kind of like drag. Before I get into that, so next time to make sure I'm still recording. Update, I am still recording. I'm recording, this is a good thing. Anyways, continuing. Limit velocity over lifetime. You can separate axes, you can do all of the drop-down stuff, the curve, constants, and all those things. Speed. You can limit the max amount of speed. So basically, I think this is going like, this is like 10, and then I forget what this does. I forgot what that does. Oh, me. Dampen. These kind of dampen them. So we do this. You notice that it dampens them and they slow down. So they shoot out and then they stop working. Shoot out and then, I'm trying to make an example. Shoot out, slow down, and eventually stop. That's what dampen does. Drag. Kind of just drags them. So with drag, they usually don't completely stop unless you make it like an absurdly high value. But I think with drag, it will keep going until it dies, but it'll keep getting slower and slower. And the amount of drag is just how fast it gets slower. You'll notice they keep going until they die, versus dampen will just stop them in their place. Multiply by size, multiply by velocity. These are things if you were to have a randomizing start size or something like that, you can multiply the dampen or the drag, the effect of it, based on how large or how fast the particles are going. So if you're having a really fast particle, will dampen much quicker than a slower particle. So pretty cool. Inherent velocity. This one's actually really fun to mess around with. This is something that you're mainly going to want to use with your world space particles, but you can use it with pretty much anything. I'm going to turn off the start speed now, just so you can basic demonstration. But right now, it's not going to do anything. We have the multipliers at 0. We're going to set the multiplier at 0.1, which for this, by the way, you're going to want to keep this at low values. If I set this to 0.1 now, notice that they move. So what it's doing is it's inheriting the velocity of the system. So when it spawns, it will maintain the same velocity that it had when it spawned. Cranking the value up, it's a much more stronger effect. Usually I keep this at very low values, but you can make it painfully strong if you really want to. Changing it from inertia to current. Current is a bit fun to mess around with. Basically, I move it like this, and the particles will inherit the velocity of what it is currently. So if you have a world space particle, if the emitter isn't moving, they won't do anything. But if it is moving, they will move with it. So if I change it to 1, I think it literally just moves to the exact position of the emitter, which is not very useful. Unless you like shake it around a lot and it kind of bugs out, but yeah. Very, very, very cool looking. Next, force over lifetime. Force over lifetime is very similar to velocity over lifetime, except it increases its force over lifetime. So basically, what happens is if I set this to 0, doesn't do much, set this to 1 on the x value, you see it gets slower and then faster over time. This is how quickly it speeds up. So if I make this a higher value, you'll notice that it's slow and then it gets really fast. You can do this with you can do this with negative values, this with positive values. You can even do between two curves or constants. You can do some crazy looking stuff. And one kind of like speed up time. Pretty cool. Set the space to world. Can't remember what that does. And randomize, I think this just don't remember. Anywho, next, color over lifetime. This is very similar to the color tab that I talked about earlier. You're going to need a shader and a material that works with changing the color of the particle, but essentially, if I have a gradient, change the bottom one to like green, move this around a little bit, you'll notice that over lifetime, it goes through that gradient. So when it's born, it's white, and as it gets older, it slowly fades to green. This also works with alpha transparency, so if I remove that, turn the transparency down, it's transparent at the beginning and slowly gets more solid. Pretty cool stuff. Reminder, you can use the right click at the top and the bottom to add nodes. You can change all of these nodes to different values to make some weird looking combinations. Change this to like this, and then this to like this. And you got some weird looking stuff. But just remember, this only works with compatible shaders. Color by speed, similar concept. You can choose a gradient or a random between two gradients, which we talked about earlier. So light orange and dark blue. Notice they're dark blue because they're at 0 speed. If I turn on that inherent velocity though, change to initial, you notice that the faster they are, different color they are. Usually this is not very well with current velocity. Basically, they're all blue. The faster they are, the more orange they are. The same thing can actually be done with transparency, which is really cool. I don't think I actually, here it does. Just change this both to white really quickly. This is actually how I accomplished the Murasama's velocity particles. So crazy tutorial here. If I change this all to 0, move this right here, that, this, move this 0, and move it up to here, that. So we have this kind of like tiny little fade into a solid color. Basically, move them around, nothing. If they're fast enough, you can see them. But if they're not fast enough, you can't see them. You can change the speed range so that it's like a more, I guess it needs to be a higher speed in order to show that. So you can see I'm moving it pretty quickly, but it's not showing, but I can move it really quickly for it to actually show something. So a lot can be done with that. Very cool. Size over lifetime. This is just basic increases size over lifetime. You can choose separate axes, which means kind of like how I went over the 3D start size and the 3D rotation right here. You can choose, just get this in there. Speed again. Rotate this 90 degree. I'm screwing things up. That's weird. What's that? Stop it. I don't know zeros now. Why? This is better. Cool. Yeah, basically, start off small, get big. You can mess with the curves right here. And you can, like, screw with it. So you see it kind of follows that curve, goes small, goes up big, goes back down, goes big again. You can do this for the different axes. So if I do this, I choose Y. So I can make this different. Yeah, that's how size over lifetime works. Size by speed. This is very similar to color by speed. I also use this in the making of the velocity particles. But let's just turn this back off. The current velocity is still on. Basically, 0 speed right now. Alright? There's nothing there. Faster they're moving though, bigger they get. And I will turn the speed rating up to 3 to show this off a bit better. They're small and moving slowly. Big when moving quickly. The way the Marsamo was accomplished was I did this. If it would let me, add a key. Click on all 3 of them. Right click, both tangents linear. And then I moved this one down to about right there. And now it's very, very, very particular on how fast you have to go in order to reach being visible. And I had to make this value very high because you don't notice, but in the game when you're swinging, you really want to do a hard swing. And in Unity, it's easier to accomplish that on lower levels, but on those lower levels, it's like a bit different in game, so you're going to have to change some values before you export, blah, 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 all that stuff. Bit weird, bit finicky, but you get used to it. Oh. Okay. I'm gonna check my recording again. I'm gonna do that. I'm just gonna keep periodically like making sure the recording still works because I really don't want it to run out of memory and then stop and then like lose everything. Anyways, rotation over lifetime. This one's pretty cool. Just start speed 5. Basically, turn the rotation over lifetime on 45. It will spin. This much. I don't. This is a degree. I think this is just how fast it spins. So you can change this value. It'll spin fast, spin slow. Choose different axes, which you won't have to worry about until you get into 3D particles. You can do random constants. You can do like any speed between 45 or 360. Pretty neat. I don't know why I chose 360 because it's not. It is not angles, it is just speeds. But that's how that works. Rotations by speed, same concept as color by speed, size by speed. I shouldn't really have to show this off. It's pretty self-explanatory. But if you really need an explanation, I forget why it's not showing that. I forget. I don't know why it's not showing that. I'm just gonna leave it be because I'm too lazy. External forces. I don't think you need this unless you're a game dev. If you're a game dev, this is not for you. This is for sabers. Go away. Noise. This one's fun. Alright. Noise. Pretty complicated. But turn this on, you see the particles going all wacky crazy. Basically, the particles are following this texture. They're emitting and they are moving around in this texture. You can change the strength to be like a lower value, so they still move with that texture, but at a less strength. One is like default, you can do higher strength, so it's manipulated more. New frequency to change how frequent it is. So if the frequency is higher, they're basically jittering. Scroll speed. Scroll speed, make it move. So now they're all going in these random directions. You can do something argument. I think scroll speed just makes them all go crazy wacky. Dampening just kind of gives them the ability to dampen based on this. You don't really have to worry about what the texture looks like. It's just showing you what the texture looks like. You mainly just need to worry about what the particles look like. Turn the frequency up, they're gonna jitter like crazy. I think the lowest the frequency can go is like this, which is basically like absolutely nothing, just going off the side. Change the scroll speed, make it scroll faster. Change the frequency down. And the scroll speed up, and they go absolutely bonkers. Make more octaves, so it's a bit more higher quality. Some quality settings, like medium is like this, and 1D is like this. I don't want to go too much into detail, but you know, you should really just kind of get used to these things by learning it yourself. Not that I don't want to teach you, it's just, you know. Position amount, you can change how much it, like the strength that it will manipulate the position. Rotation amount, the strength that it will manipulate rotation. Which you'll notice if you look closely, some of them are rotating. Can't really see it too well, but they do rotate. And size amount, how much it can affect the size. You can also do separate axes, which everything can have different axes. So like, if you don't want it to affect that or that, you can just have it affect the x-axis, so it's just going back and forth, really. Instead of like being able to move up and down or left and right, just goes on this axis. Alright, next, collision. I'm actually going to make a cube real quick. This at 0, 0, 0. This at 0, 0, 0. Put this cube down and expand it. Particles right here. Enable collision. Okay. So when you first open it, you're going to see these weird looking circles. What you want to do is you want to get these circles to be about the same size as your particles. To do this, find the radius scale right here. Just kind of size it down until it's about the size of the particle. Yeah. Now set this to world. Set it to world. That way it will collide with anything that has a collider. You know something has a collider? If like right here, cube, box collider. Its collisions will be in the shape of a box. That's how it works. Pretty basic rundown of what a collision is. Over here, if I move this down, you'll see the particles bounce off it. If I turn the collision off, they just go through it. If I have collision on, they bounce off it. The reason why I made you turn down the radius scale is because if you turn it up, you notice that they're bouncing off it based on this radius, which is not what you want. You want it to be as accurate to the particles as possible, unless, of course, you have a scenario where you don't want it to be as accurate to the particle as possible. It's up to you, honestly. Right here, dampen. But first, let's just turn the bounce off. If you look, they collide with the surface and they keep going. If you turn this dampen, I set that to 1, which is the max value. As soon as they collide with the surface, they just stop moving. I have inherent velocity. As soon as they collide with the surface, they just stop moving. If I turn this dampen down to like 0.5, you notice that these kind of slow down. They don't actually fully stop. They just slow down when they hit the surface. Bounce. Saw this one already. Essentially makes the particles bounce. The higher the value, the more it's going to bounce. Max is 2. Lifetime loss. It's actually a pretty neat one. From the lifetime loss all the way up. Notice that as soon as it collides with anything, they just die. Turn it down to like a little bit, they lose a lot of their lifetime upon colliding. Min kill speed and max kill speed. This goes with the lifetime. You can mess with this. Not entirely sure what it does, but it does something. So that's there, I guess. Collision quality. These are kind of nice. It's high, medium, and low. High is what you've been playing around with. It's just these base collisions. Medium kind of goes through almost. So if I were to do this, notice that sometimes it doesn't exactly want to collide. If I do high collision, you notice that it always wants to collide. It's always wanting to collide. If it's inside of a collider, it doesn't want to do anything. It's medium. It'll decide, okay, maybe I want to collide, but, maybe if I'm inside of a collider, I don't really want to. And maybe if I hit the bottom of a collider, I can stick. I don't have to stick. I can, but I don't have to. And low is just pretty much just medium, but worse. That collides with. Kind of just want to have all of these on. Next, collision shapes is how high quality of a collision can it be. So like, say you have a high quality mesh and it has like a custom collider on it, you would want to maybe turn down the collision quality a bit so it lags less, if that makes sense. That way it's not colliding with too much at once. Dynamic colliders. Not really sure what this does. Collider force. Also not sure what this does. You can multiply stuff. This is mostly for like dampening bounce and whatnot. I'm getting kind of tired, so slow as I'm going to speed up. Visualize bounce, just show you the bounce of collision. All that good stuff. Pretty much everything else you don't really need to mess with. Just basic rundown. Triggers, you don't need to mess with this. It's a bit iffy. And it doesn't really work well with Beat Saber because you don't have access to the components of, like, say, the platforms. So you don't really need to mess with triggers. Subemitters. Just do a quick rundown of subemitters. Keep doing this. We're going to turn this off. Dynamic particle system. We're going to give it not an emission. We're going to give it a burst of 30. And the looping will be off. So every time it spawns, does that. Throw this under this particle system. So basically when you want to have a sub-emitter, you're going to take another particle system and parent it under the main one. Take the main particle system, click on sub-emitter, and then drag the particle system that's under it into here. So on birth, every single one of these particles will emit one of these bursts until this particle system hits its maximum. Now, one thing you can do, if I just turn down the burst real quick, and then turn the shape to this direction, and then this Basically, this is happening at birth. When a particle spawns in, it also spawns in its subemitter. You can also do this on death, meaning that when a particle dies, it spawns in a subemitter. This is really good for things like fireworks. So you have a main particle, it shoots up, it dies, and when it dies, it launches out its subemitter. You can also do on collision. This is a very neat one. If I go here and I turn down the animation. This one's actually really cool. Basically, every time the particle collides with something, just go here, turn the collisions back on. Every time it collides, it emits a subemitter. Really neat. There's also a trigger and manual. Again, you don't have these for Beat Saber, so you don't need to worry about it. That's how subemitters work. Texture sheet animations. Honestly, might have to make a whole other video on these because these can get very in-depth, and I am tired right now. So we'll just leave texture sheet animations for now. Lights, don't worry about it. Beat Saber doesn't use lights. Trails. You can make trails. Trails are cool. I actually have a trail that I set up right here. Trail will follow the particle. Let's just turn this on so it stops colliding. You can change the lifetime of the trail so it like lasts for a shorter amount of time, or for a longer amount of time, or for the entire time it's still alive. Minimum vertex distance, always change this to 0.01. This just stops it from looking weird. No idea why my project is lagging right now. I'll fix that subemitters on. Oops. Nope, it's just lagging for no reason, and I don't know why. So we'll just let it lag. How about that? Maybe you guys have a bunch of programs open it up. I don't know. Die with particles. This is just, does it die with the particle? Yes, it does. Very cool. Unity project selected, so I'm going to turn this back up to 0.2. It's very, I don't know why it's lagging. World space is pretty neat. Oh my god, it's lagging. Essentially, makes them a part of a world space. I genuinely don't know why it's lagging so bad right now. Just deal with it. Having it not world space means the trails just kind of stick with the particle. Having them world space makes them kind of stay in the world. Turning off die with particles means that once the particle dies, the trail kind of like follows through it. Stretch, tile, bunch of settings. Width of a trail, you can change the width of the trail. Color of a trail, again, for those color-based shaders. Don't need to worry about lighting data, don't need to worry about shadows. I wonder if this would work better if I put a different shader on. Definitely not. I don't know why. Okay, that's weird. Let's use the ribbon. I don't know why is ribbon running so well? Okay, whatever, dude. We'll change this to this, and change this, the trail, to that. You'll notice that the ribbon does is it follows every single particle. So that can be used for some pretty cool effects. And basically for trails. Custom data, don't worry about it. Render right here. This is where you can find a lot of settings. Most of these you don't need to worry about. Main things you want to worry about are up here. You can change the render mode to things like Struct Billboard, which does something like this. This is how I made fake glow back in the day. Do a horizontal billboard. This is what that looks like. Vertical billboard. These look like Minecraft Pocket Edition items being dropped on the floor. And a mesh. Meshes are my favorite to use, but they're very performance heavy. You can essentially choose this mesh. As of right now, the render alignment is focused on my view. You can change that to local. And now you can see, just to look well. See, these are cubes, particles with the cubes. They're really cool looking. One cool thing you do is change this to world. So now they're always facing this world space, right? They're always facing this world kind of rotation. And this is where that 3D rotation and 3D size comes in. Change this to constant. See, I can change the 3D sizes, with the Y's, the X, and the Z. You can change the rotation. And keep in mind, if you set it to a world value, it will not be affected by the base's rotation. Only the emission, the direction it goes, will be affected by the base, unless you have like velocities or that kind of stuff. And the only way to make it rotate is through these values, or like a rotation over lifetime, rotation over speed, or whatever. And yeah, with that said, I guess that's pretty much it for that. That's basically a general rundown on how particle systems work and how all the things work. So use this video to your advantage. If I need to, I'll make a follow-up video stating a bunch of like other things and crazy wacky stuff. So leave some suggestions, and I'll try and get to the suggestions and show how they're made. I think that'd be really cool if they suggested some ideas of particle systems that I can make, and then show you the process of me making them. Kind of help you learn a bit about particles. But hope this video helps. Yeah, I don't know where else to go from it. Have fun making things, I guess. Okay, that's it. Goodbye.